The Great Seer Nostradamus Tells All by William P. Lazarus. Chapter 3, Episode 2, The Horse Was Slowing. Ernest continued southward, but at a much more leisurely speed. They passed an inn where loud voices and laughter burst from open windows. Nostradame caught a scent of something delicious, but it drifted away as they continued on. He glanced over his shoulder, straining to see the inn, but Ernest blocked the view. Soon after, in the dying, shadowy sunlight of early evening, they entered onto a concrete road, overgrown with weeds, shielded here and there by an overeager bush or a fallen tree. The road's surface was cracked and gray, but obviously harder and older than the dirt. Nostradame peered around the horse's sweaty neck. They had reached some old buildings and markings. He had never seen anything like them. They were so strange, so unlike anything in Saint-Rémy. At first he thought the structures might have something to do with Avignon, as though the popes might have erected them. He had never been to Avignon, but imagined the city must have such ornately carved edifices to attract popes from their usual home in Rome. He could see the stone heads of statues, with curly locks and elegant noses. Then, too, there were half columns with their Corinthian tops fallen off. In the midst of the collapsed stone stood a triumphant arch. Ernest steered the horse beneath it. Nostradame looked up at spider webs and moss growing amid the splintered stone. Yet the structure stood strong and true. Avignon, he wondered aloud. Les Baux, Ernest told him. The Romans thought they could erect such a village that time would not forget what they had done, but of course it has. The horse stopped, Nostradame alit. His legs felt unstable, partly from the long ride and partly from the awe he felt looking at the old monuments. The Romans were here. That was another storied name from the histories his grandfather told him. The Romans were just another name amid the others, and yet they were real. He could almost see the ghosts of soldiers amid the ruins. He peppered Ernest with questions about the structures. When were they built? What were they for? Without fanfare or apparent interest, Ernest dryly pointed out a decayed bath, a few old homes, a long-ignored temple. He couldn't decipher markings, so Nostradame ran tremulous fingers along the hard engravings, feeling the letters, trying to sense some meaning in their arcane shapes. His stomach stopped complaining as his mind filled with new information. "You like this stuff?" Ernest sniffed. "I suppose it's better looking at this than drinking English wine." Nostradame nodded. Les Baux was just as his grandfather had described, Romans and their grand structures. Only great heroes could have erected such monuments. "SHH," Ernest said. He pointed. Perhaps 300 yards away near a column sat a group of people. They were huddled together, talking, eating. There had to be 3 or 4 children in the group along with a handful of adults. Ernest grabbed the blanket and again wrapped it around Nostradame, who struggled briefly. The wool was as suffocating as before. Ernest held him tight. "You want to eat?" he asked with a hiss. Nostradame nodded. "Then just follow where I lead." "Do I have the plague again?" Violently shaking his head, Ernest propelled him forward. "You are a holy man, a seer. Now shut up and just listen. Don't look at anyone. Keep your eyes to the ground, and, for God's sake, act holier than thou art." They moved slowly forward. Ernest stopped to smear himself with more dirt and then began to hum an incoherent song in a low voice. He would walk, then stop and sway, hum, walk, sway, hum. Nostradame just stumbled, studying the ruins so he didn't have to look at the small crowd now nearby. Ernest led him slowly toward the small semicircle of people. Nostradame could hear a hum of conversation. That started Ernest singing, "My Kamolcha Abalim Adonai, my Kamolcha Nadar HaKodesh." Nostradame didn't recognize the strange words, but stumbled along, feeling suffocatingly hot and bumping into an occasional loose stone or fallen monument. Suddenly, Ernest stopped. There was dead silence. Even the cicadae paused in their ceaseless racket. Nostradame pulled the blanket tighter around him and tried pretending to concentrate. "Who dares desecrate our holy shrines?" Ernest bellowed in a deep, awful voice. The pilgrims quickly stood. Nostradame heard the shuffling of feet, the frightened gasps. "Who dares sit among our sacred sites and profane them with their crumbs?" Ernest continued in his awesome voice. Stunned, Nostradame tried to turn his head to look at Ernest, but the youth resisted any movement, holding him stiff and unbending. "We are holy hermits, the caretakers of these sacred ruins. We have debased ourselves for the Lord, worn such rags, lived such lives in honor of the greatness of God. We have given up such worldly pleasures as fine robes, warmth of fire, and rich foods for this most holy of lives. We seek nothing but privacy and peace that we may contemplate the Lord in silence. And yet, his voice rose, there are those who would profane and demean our sacrifice with such little thought. Oh no, 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 the pilgrims cried. Holy priest, Ernest commanded. Smite these infidels who would dare mar our godly sight. In an aside, he whispered for Nostradame to slowly raise his hands. In Jesu's name, desist, called a man among the crowd of scared pilgrims. He threw back his cowl to reveal gray hair and an aged face. We had no idea we had transgressed on holy ground. We are simple servants of the Lord on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. We stopped here among these ruins only to rest. Ruins, shrieked Ernest. Ruins, he almost quivered in rage. Nostradame continued to lift his hands slowly. These are less balks, the sanctified monuments of Pope Urban, the Magnificent, Ernest roared on. You would defame this holy ground and his sainted name by calling it a ruin. The Holy See commands that we tend to this sacred site. Begone, begone, before I have the most reverent Father here, imbued with the eternal power granted by Pope Leo, curse you to everlasting damnation. One of the children began to cry. Nostradame's arms started to tire and he began to lower them. Ernest jabbed him with an elbow and he stopped. Instead, Nostradame fluttered his fingers, all the while wishing he could see through the cloth draped before his face. His wiggling fingers seemed a pitiful gesture. Despite being thoroughly disguised, Nostradame felt exposed. His knees trembled, the blanket shook. Any moment, one of those pilgrims was going to snatch off the blanket and recognize a child. Ernest would probably say it was a miracle, but Nostradame didn't have that much faith in the pilgrim's credulity. Holy Fathers, the old man said pitifully, they all fell to their knees. We have walked far and are tired. We have but the little sustenance the Lord provides. We found only a place to rest and food lying here in answer to our prayers. You would dare eat the sacrifices of honest travelers, the little they have gathered, as did Abel the shepherd to give to their Lord. You generation of vipers, you marauders, you Huns, no priest could absolve your sins. No visit to the great grotto of Jesus' birth could wash away your evil transgressions, Ernest insisted boldly. What must we do? A woman wailed. Begone, do not stop until you cross into Outremer. Ernest demanded. There, you must kneel and kiss the ground with the passion of a new convert. You must wash yourself in the Jordan. You must ask forgiveness of the priest of the Holy Sepulchre. You must pray that an all-forgiving God will heed your tears. And you must pay for the sacrifice you have put into your bodies that Jesus not demand his just deserts from your flesh. But we have so little money, a woman pitifully whimpered. Leave it and begone, Ernest ordered. I cannot hold back the fearsome wrath of this holy man much longer. He is a hermit who has sat these many years on this site, guarding it, shielding it from vandals such as you. Begone, I say, before he opens his mouth and utters a curse that carries the weight of the Lord and cannot be withdrawn until Judgment Day. Dear God, the man moaned. Nostradame could hear a clatter as coins fell to the stone floor, then sandaled feet began to hurry away. Don't move, Ernest murmured. They are starting to slow down. Nostradame finally adjusted the blanket so he could see better. There, just beyond the triumphant arch, he spotted a covey of robed figures scurrying in disarray. Children were stumbling. Adults grabbed the youngsters' arms and, ignoring the crying and caterwauling, pulled them along. In a minute or two, the crowd had vanished into the spreading darkness. Do you think they'll come back? Only on bended knee, Ernest said, hastily collecting some of the few pennies on the ground. He plopped down next to a piece of cloth spread across the ground and bearing chicken, bread, cheese, garlic, and leeks. I told you we'd find food, he said. And we were paid for the privilege. He gulped as Nostradame joined him in the feast. No pilgrims carried these foods. They must have scared off someone with money for such a meal. He glanced around him. Eat fast, Nostradame did. But every now and then he looked towards the south where the pilgrims had disappeared. How pitiful they looked. How sad. Where would they go? Would they survive? Would God protect them? Ernest did not care. He sat and ate as if there were nothing else in the world. Nostradame continually glanced up, wondering what terrors awaited those innocent pilgrims. Are you sure they will be all right? He asked plaintively. Pilgrims are never all right, Ernest replied. They have left their homes and jobs to travel thousands of miles to see a few old buildings. No one wants them to visit. They are sick people. Besides, why worry about tomorrow? There's no future. There is nothing beyond a full belly and an available breast. Nostradame tried to picture something happening in the future. He closed his eyes to concentrate and saw only a black image in his mind. He strained harder. "What ho?" said a loud voice in his brain. Nostradame sat up. He was getting through. There was a crack in the darkness. He could feel light curling around the bony edges of his brain. A moment or two and he would see an image, perhaps of tomorrow or the day after. His heart began to surge. He had never been this excited. "So you've eaten it all," the voice said sorrowfully. "I hear a voice," Nostradame exclaimed. Ernest grunted. "How perceptive," he muttered. A dark shadow splayed across Nostradame's face. He slowly opened his eyes to see the grinning countenance of a fat, robed monk. For an instant, Nostradame wasn't sure if the monk were a figment from the future or actually real. Smiling, standing in front of him, the monk farted. Then Nostradame quickly learned the truth. Reality stank. Share this story with other book lovers before moving to Chapter 4, Episode 1.